Fans of Road Rash will have no surprise to see the many different and interesting games that were released across a variety of different consoles dating way back to the Sega Mega Drive or Genesis back in the early 90s, that would see ports of the first game being added to the likes of the Sega Master System, with re-envisionings of the game later being added to the likes of the Panasonic 3DO, Sega Saturn, PlayStation, PC, but eventually it would move into the realm of 3D, and we would first get this rendition of Road Rash 3D in 1998, which I have covered in a previous video. There'll be a link in the description. Even Nintendo with the Nintendo 64 also got its own version of Road Rash that would be in 3D as well, and that's a good solid game for its console. But the last and final game of the Road Rash series in general would come in the form of Road Rash Jailbreak that would release in 2000 on the PlayStation, and it would also get a subsequent edition on the Nintendo Game Boy Advance in 2003. And this game would be very different in terms of its gameplay style. While it took elements seen previously in Road Rash 3D and Road Rash 64, it combined multiplayer aspects into it, where with the two-player modes you could play as the cops, the robbers, and you could also have a sidecar mode where you could work with other players. So player 2 could, say for instance, be the person in the sidecar that would be beating the crap out of everybody while you're racing, while player 1 focuses on just driving the bike as is. Now the game did receive decent enough feedback with regards to its reviews of the time, while the Game Boy Advance edition wasn't considered all that great, but the game did still sell well in high numbers, and with it being the last Road Rash game, it is often considered a favourite among many. Even people that I do be chatting to, even in the comments on the channel, do often talk about Road Rash Jailbreak as being among some of their favourite games that they ever played on the PlayStation during their younger years growing up. And funny enough, out of all of the Road Rash games, it was the one edition that I never really fully got the chance to sit down and play until recently. For whatever reason, I just never really got round to it. I suppose at the time my favourite Road Rash was, and still is in fairness, in all honesty, is the first game that was released on the PlayStation. I just think that game is incredible. I think it's awesome. While it may not have aged well, I still think it just has enough pick up and play appeal that is a true classic in every regard. But that doesn't take away from Road Rash Jailbreak. I will admit, having sat down to play this game for recording this video, I found myself spending and putting in a couple of hours into playing this. I can understand why people highly rate this game and highly regard it as one of their favourites on the PlayStation. This game is really a lot of fun. I had a blast playing it. Yeah, it's tricky, it's quirky, and especially the further into it that you get, as with all of these games, it does become more difficult. But if you played enough racing games, if you played enough motorbike games or driving games in general, chances are you'll be quickly able to adapt to the control mechanisms and styles. You'll know when to brake, you'll know when to slow down to help you get round corners. Now the caveat with this is, like other Road Rash games, is that you also have to deal with oncoming obstacles with other cars, other bikers that are constantly trying to knock you off. Now you will have access to a variety of different weapons which you can gain upgrades further into the game with each race that you manage to win. You can unlock different elements that will help you make your life easier basically. And while the game during its early years, one of the issues that people had was regarding the graphics, considering them to be not that great with regards to 3D games. But if we look back at it now, I really like them. I think it has a distinctive charm to it. Plus, what I like about this, it was the same in Road Rash 3D, that you could play in the time trial mode where you could literally play the game as an open world racer, so you could literally traverse the entire game world and choose any route that you could possibly take, and you could race around each of the environments until you literally crashed and damaged the bike where you couldn't race it anymore. So you had full freedom to do that if you wanted to do it. So you weren't just confined to the actual races themselves in order to compete, in order to have fun. There were so many elements in this game that added to the longevity of the experience. Yes, it is tricky by today's standards, but I have to say now, I definitely enjoyed this one. And in many respects, it's one of those games that doesn't happen that often, but then I'd be saying to myself, why did I not play this sooner? But I suppose it comes down to a number of different things. You either didn't get the chance to, you couldn't afford to play it, or maybe it just wasn't the right game to play at that time. And sometimes that happens. Whereas you have a game there, or you have the opportunity to play it, but just for some reason you just can't seem to gel with it in the same way that you might do, say, a few years later. And I've had that happen to me with quite a few games over the years, where I wouldn't play it till maybe 2, 3, maybe even 5 years later, and then suddenly things just click, and then you end up having one of the best experiences that you could have with a game. You just didn't have it at that original time when you first played it. And I have to say now, this for me is one of those experiences. This is a really fun game. I had a blast with it. Even the sound effects, when you hear the quips and the one-liners from your own character, or even the other characters racing around the road, when you're listening to it, some of them actually had me in stitches laughing, because I just was like, because you weren't expecting it. You'd be just driving along and then somebody would say something, and sure, it would be more of a distraction more than anything, and what would happen is it caused you to crash because you weren't watching what you were doing because you were too busy laughing. But I just love all of those little quirky elements with games like that, something that can throw you off, and something especially if it puts a smile in your face. It makes the experience so much more worthwhile, and I have to say this game really does do that. Like, graphics aside, right, it's not the best looking game on the PlayStation, it's far from it, but it definitely makes up for it in its play appeal and just the impact that it leaves on you as a player. It is tough, it is tricky, but it's like anything else. You put time into it, you will get familiar with it, and if you allow yourself to think of this game with an open mind, you will have a blast with this. It is a lot of fun, and I'd imagine even more so that it's even more fun to play with your mates, especially in the sidecar mode as well. But even the single player mode, it's still a good blast to play. It's competitive, it will challenge you, but there's definitely a lot of laughs to be had, because the funny thing is, even now going back to playing this years later, even when you do mess up and you do screw up, you can't allow yourself or even find yourself getting annoyed with it. You're too busy laughing at everything to really kind of take it seriously in many respects. Now, that mightn't have been the case back years ago, because you would have been a lot more competitive, but with age you obviously start to mellow, so you just see things for what they are, so you can enjoy it for what it is. But yeah, I have to say this game is definitely a no-brainer in my book for playing and having a lot of fun. It is a good solid experience. It's a fun racing game. It has all of the quirks and elements that you want from a title like this, regardless of its reviews or its visuals. It's not a bad looking game. If anything, I actually like the visual style, but I like the blockiness of the aesthetic of it. I think it really suits it, and it's very reflective of its time. The fact is that you can mix the different bike types that you can race as, either with likes of super bikes or even more grunty or more muscle kind of bikes that have their own distinctive sounds and elements, so that you can cater the game to your own sense of style as well, which is even more appealing. So for fans that want to play the classic Road Rash experience, you can use the super bikes, but one that wants a bit more of a gruntier affair can play with the more heavier bikes to use. Now, they all have their own distinctive traits and handling characteristics, but like I said, to put a bit of time into it, you'll figure things out fairly quickly, and you still will have a lot of fun. But regardless of what I think of it, what do you think of Road Rash Jailbreak for the PlayStation? Would this be among your favourite racing games on the console, but would it also be your favourite racing game in the Road Rash series? It will be interesting to hear whatever stories you do have, so be sure to share it down in the comments below. And if you would like to see more content around other types of interesting bike racing games, or just racing games in general that I have covered on the PlayStation, which I'll be honest, I have covered a lot, in fairness I have, because it's definitely one of my favourite genres in video games in general. So if you would like to see more of them, be sure to leave a like, subscribe to the channel, and again, you can check out this playlist here on screen where I have covered a lot more of those games so that you can see them in action. And as always, keep those gaming memories alive.